Good day, folks, and welcome to the Two Maesters. And today we're talking about Dune Part 2. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thankfully that we're heading towards British summertime and the flowers are starting to peek out. The sun's setting a lot later than it used to be, but the rain isn't something I'm looking forward to. But thankfully we've got some nice films and shows to discuss as we head into the latter part of the year.
And exactly, we're going to be talking about Dune, which is about a desert planet where there's no rain, so
Yes.
perfect. The opposite of what we're experiencing right now. So as everyone knows, Dune Part 2 is out at the moment. I saw it on Saturday. This is a Tuesday, so 4 days ago. Josh, when did you see it?
I saw it on Thursday, so that would be 6 days ago, yeah.
And did you see it in like 3D, IMAX, or just normal screen?
Normal screen, so I just went to my local View Cinema. I think partly just because it's always been cheap. If a brand new film comes out, it's like no child, no student ticket. Everyone is $6.99, and I'm like,
Thank
goodness, especially due to these hard times. $6.99 to watch a really good film is perfect.
Yeah, I think so too. I always just go to a VUE because it's only $6.99 per ticket. Since COVID, they reduced ticket prices down big time. So I just can't. It makes me go to the cinema more, to be honest. So I know you could spend. Some people go to like these fancy cinemas like Everyman, where it's like, I think like 17 quid for a ticket, but you get like a comfy chair and stuff. I'm like, you're just watching a movie. Like as long as my chair's not like covered in sticky popcorn or worse.
Yeah. And then you've got stuff like, I think it's called Curzon. There's one in like Victoria where you can sit down and eat and watch the cinema. But I'm like, but if you eat and you drink too much, you then might need the toilets, and therefore you then miss out on key parts of the film, especially like a long film like Dune Part 2. You don't want to be missing key scenes in it as well. I know,
and there's something I want to point out. The reason why I asked you about how you watched it is on Rotten Tomatoes, the overall audience review, I think the website just makes that based on all the audience reviews that got uploaded. It says, Dune Part 2 is nearly 3 hours of exceptional sci-fi spectacle that needs to be seen on the biggest screen possible. So don't go watching it on your iPhones, folks, whatever you do. Because if there's one thing I will say about Dune Part 2, it is visually stunning.
Yes, yeah.
Like, it's really like arty, and some of the color palette and the shots and how things are shown on it is just like, it's an experience to watch, and it's meant to be watched on like as big a screen as possible, or like if you don't have a big screen, just sit as close to your TV as possible.
Yeah, because especially when you see like the scenes of large amounts of armies, you can't really see it in full detail on a small screen like an iPad or an iPhone. And unfortunately, all of us have got like 70-inch television with surround sound. So we advise you, if you have the spare change, watch in cinema, because it's a special film to watch.
Oh, definitely. So let's get stuck into the plot. So I'll just give it quick overview. So the plot is, it takes off immediately after Dune Part 1. Paul Atreides unites with the Fremen people of the desert of the planet Arrakis to wage war against House Harkonnen and also the Emperor of the Imperium. Now, David Villeneuve, God, I'm going to enjoy pronouncing that, stated that the film would continue directly from the first, and specifically described it as being the second part. He described the film as being an epic war movie, adding that while the first film was more contemplative, the second would feature more action. I actually don't think that's true. I think that's a load of crap, to be honest, because the first one had fight scenes and stuff, and it was very contemplative.
Yes.
But the second one, I think it was maybe more contemplative, because the actual big army fight at the end was over in like, a minute, maybe 2 minutes. You had the big worms, the big fight between the Sardaukar and the worms. It wasn't really a fight. They just ran away, because you try fighting a gigantic sandworm. So yeah, I disagree with that statement. And then, moving on, Villeneuve sought to anchor the movie to the characters, primarily Paul and Chani. with the two featured in an epic love story between them. Villeneuve described them as the epicenter of the story. Some interesting backside. Zendaya initially found difficulty in creating dialogue, commenting that it was funny trying to figure out in this futuristic space talk, like, how do they flirt? Chalamet also added that Paul would be heavily influenced by Chani, serving as his moral compass. Additionally, Paul becomes deeply embedded in feminine culture, developing a closer bond with Stilgar, who somewhat becomes a mentor to him in a way. While tensions emerge between Chani and Lady Jessica, Paul's mum, because Jessica is basically manufacturing a prophecy, and Chani is very much aware of its true nature. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and especially the fact that the Bene Gesserits have used this prophecy to basically control the Fremen, and then seeing like the two different factions within the Fremen. You've got those in the north who are pretty much skeptical, which I think Chani's from the north.
Yeah.
And then those in the south who are full on supporters and like full on, as they would say, Paul stands.
Yeah.
So you see anything he does is holy and must be worshipped. and it is actually very, very, I think that's another reason why I really did love the film, was just the fact that it talked about stuff like that, like the fact that they developed a prophecy, so therefore they could then have Paul Atreides, and then the Bene Gesserits could then control him, so then they could use him to then control the Fremen.
Exactly. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is very interesting on that point. And then the question you have to ask is that he wants vengeance against the Emperor and also the Baron for the death of his father and also the death of other people in his family. And it's like, how far is he going to push this prophecy to get his revenge? Or is he going to actually be like, I think I've gone too far with it. Maybe I should get this revenge, but maybe in a different way. And then brings in like the nuclear weapons, which are also discussed later in the film.
They got nukes. Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was badass. And it's a lot of it is he's the Kwisatz Haderach, as the Bene Gesserit love saying. He has this prescience, this visions of the future. When do you remember when he first goes to Sietch Tabor, the home of the Fremen, where Stilgar is, and he's eating like what looks like porridge, but it's full of like lots of spice. He's having more and more visions that are a lot more vivid, and he sees people starving and something going on with Chani. And a lot of this movie, you see his unwillingness to follow his visions because he sees in the future a crusade and go south. I won't go south. I don't want that. This leads to war and death. And then, well, eventually Sietch Tabor gets attacked. So, okay, cool, let's do it. I love how you really picked up on the lore there, like the Bene Gesserit, how they use this thing called the Missionaria Protectiva, where they send like people, Reverend Mothers and other sisters, to basically just spread word of prophecy and slowly, step by step, put in the groundworks for something like this to happen. And the Kwisatz Haderach is their creation. They've been working for they have plans stretching centuries. They're like, it's weird because you look at the Emperor and you're like, is he the most powerful man in the universe? You look at the Bene Gesserit, like, are they the most powerful organization in the universe? You look at who owns the spice? Are they the most powerful people in the universe? Like,
and I think that's the thing that you do see in Dune, is that you've got different levels of power. You've got spiritual power that the Bene Gesserits have, that they have over just generally the
anyone
populace.
Who believes in what they did, they say.
Then you have the Emperor who has power, but then you've also got I forgot what the council's called.
The Landsrat?
Yeah, the Landsrat. They also have power in and of themselves, and then you also see that so do the Fremen. So then it's just different versions of power, and then you kind of like see that Paul Atreides is basically trying to unite all these different factions under him, and that a lot of the fighting is, and potentially in the next films, and possibly seen in the books, is that a lot of the fighting is the pushback of him trying to consolidate all of these different factions under himself.
Have you looked up on Wikipedia what happens in the next book?
No.
I'll keep my mouth shut then. Or do you want me to speak spoilers in this, or should I keep my mouth shut? I'll keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, we can keep,
I can tell you that you're liking Dune now. It's like, So I think if you haven't read the books, I think the first Dune was a little hard to get your head round. Whilst Dune 2, I think maybe it's a bit more appealing to everyone because it just looks beautiful regardless. And the stuff about how religion, well, I wouldn't say religion because that's not fair, but how cults and prophecies are manufactured and stuff, like seeing how Jessica was doing that, like, you must prey on the weak and vulnerable, start with them, they'll be easily persuaded, and then we'll get everyone in the north. And I was like, wow, this is dark.
And like, there was even instances in history, Netflix is doing a documentary about Alexander the Great, but I learned, like, just like watching just documentaries on YouTube, that he was kind of seen as like a prophecy for the Egyptians, because the Egyptian people had been taken over by I always make mistakes when I say it, the Achaemenid Empire, which were the Persians. So then when Alexander the Great then invaded and defeated the Persians in Egypt, they were like, oh my days, he's our savior. So they actually anointed him as the pharaoh. And in Egyptian culture, the pharaoh was the avatar of the Egyptian god, I believe, Ra.
Right.
So then he started to like really dig into that he was the Egyptian god Ra for them. He also went off. Partly, I think they said due to his mum, that he was also the son of Zeus, that he pushed on the Greeks to convince them that he was their savior. He was also, I think, to the Persians. And the fact that you kind of had, like, within his ranks, like the Macedonians who'd been there from the beginning were like, what is this guy on? Like, we know him as Alexander before he was the Great, before all of this. And you could kind of see that they were pushing back on it. And it's just weird that you actually now see this within Dune, and the fact that people have done that in history, and you've also seen how it kind of doesn't work, because it didn't really work for him, because when Alexander the Great kept on pushing it, people were trying to assassinate him. So the fact that some of the Macedonians were like, well, no, he's just some normal guy. Why is he pretending to act like he's so high and mighty? So they kind of became like disenfranchised.
Well, yeah, you can't appeal to everyone. Just shows you can't appeal to everyone.
So there's probably some people who later down the line in the books are like, no, he isn't some special guy. He's a guy that was born. He has a mum. He's just a normal human being. Yeah. So therefore, you need to stop worshipping him.
Yeah, it's done a lot of like conquering empires do that. Like one of the Roman gods, like loosely based off the Latin, like almost carbon
copies of the Greeks.
Yeah. Was that a way to try and win over like Greek supporters? Sorry, I said Latin. I meant Greek. Yeah, like sort of win over.
Yeah, and like I think one other thing people forget is that the Romans were kind of like a offshoot of like the Greeks. So a lot of like the culture. Also, as you said, their gods as well, which funnily we use the actual Roman names of the Greek gods for like the different planets as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's kind of like weird, because then one of the things that the Romans did, which was clever, that helped them, was that they'd pick up the different things from the different people they encountered or conquered, and then just did it like one step better.
Yeah.
So then they just, for example, one thing that they did utilize was they first used to fight like the Macedonians and have like, the whole hoplite shields.
Yeah.
But then they realized that didn't work. So they then innovated that. They also, at the time, Carthage was one of the best like nations with their navy, and the Romans. You should watch a video. It's oversimplified about the First Punic Wars. Basically, the Romans just kept failing to build better ships until they then eventually did, and then conquered Carthage and defeated them, because they were able to then be on a level playing field.
Oh, right, I see.
So it's kind of like the Romans that I think that kind of brought their downfall, was that they stopped innovating, because they got like, what every empire does, when they get to becoming the most powerful in their neighborhood, they kind of like chill out and
they get lazy.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could say that about what's going on in the world today with the USA and the rise of China, perhaps. I guess you always need that technological innovation. But anyway, sidetrack.
Yeah.
It always goes back to the Roman Empire. So yeah, in Dune, you see that with Paul Atreides. There's that scene of Gurney Halleck where it's like, the people are saying you're a prophet, like, you should use it. And Paul's like, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. It's like, use it. And it's kind of, there's like three three sort of modes of thought. There's the people who actually believe he's the prophet, the lisan al-gaib, which is the most quoted thing in that movie. I'd love to see how many times they say that. And the memes are so good online as well. Like when you're trying to get ketchup out of a bottle and someone shows you a really good technique for getting it out, and like lisan al-gaib. Yeah. And then you've got the people who don't actually believe in a prophecy but agree that Paul should just use it for their own benefit. Like, for example, Jessica, Gurney Halleck. And then you've got the people that just don't believe it at all, which is Chani. And she is pretty much the embodiment of the skepticism. And whilst it wasn't quite the same way in the books, you know, at the end, Paul just is such a dick to Chani. Like,
yeah, like I think as I did read up on this, and like,
go on.
And I also heard like an interview by the director. He was saying that with films, which is different from books, is that you need to have, like, if you're showing like a couple, you need to actually show them bonding together for the audience to understand. Because with books,
character development,
so with books, you come up with your own thought of, okay, this is what Chani and Paul would have done when they were going on dates or courting each other. But then in the film, they actually have to show it. So she has more of like a prominent role in the films, the director was saying, than in the books.
Yeah, she does actually. Yeah.
And one of the things that I actually did read was that it was kind of like Paul's plan from the beginning to marry the emperor's daughter to then bring about a stability. So then for fans who didn't know about this or hadn't read the books, it was like a huge shock. Like, wait, no. So you've been dating this girl for the past 1.5 films. Now you're just dumping her. But then if you think about it, like on a scale of like empire building, you then think to yourself, that's the easiest way to prevent warfare.
Exactly. Don't marry yourself off too early. And that's, if we go back to Dune Part 1, Paul's father, Duke Leto Atreides, he never actually married Jessica. She was formerly just a concubine. The whole idea is he'd remain theoretically single, so people would try and court with him to forge alliances, and he might marry or he might not, but people will still try and cozy up to him. So it's like
and also talking
strategic.
About Jessica, the fact you find out that the Baron's her father,
and
that I keep on forgetting who's the Baron's nephew. It's
there's two, Raban and Fader Alpha.
Fader Alpha, he's the one who fights Paul at the end.
Yeah, with that stunning duel, that was really well done.
And I think some of the stuff that goes, because I did some like research after like watching the film, that goes over people's heads is like when Paul jokes that they're actually cousins, and then for some fans are like, wait, what? How does that make sense?
I love Fader Alpha's reaction as well. That was
and then you
funny.
Actually realize actually they are cousins.
Yeah, they are, and it's like Fader Alpha is like, oh, well, you wouldn't be the first family member I've killed. I was like.
Yeah,
I love Fader Alpha. He's a horrible, evil person, but
he is.
He was a good bad guy. I guess it should have been a bigger deal than it was really. Because I rewatched Dune Part 1 with my partner literally the day before we went to watch Part 2 because we both need. Oh, I didn't need a reminder. I'm a nerd, but she
Going
did.
under the basset.
Yeah, exactly. And the way they drop in the movie, it just could have been a bit of a bigger deal, but I'm glad they brought it back up in this because there was like one or two things that I wouldn't say continuity errors, but they just skipped out. Like, for example, one character, Fafir Havat, who was a mentat. You saw him not too much, but he's basically like one of Duke Leto Atreides' like military leaders, etc. He was supposed to be in this, but his scene was edited out for some reason, which is unfortunate. I can't really think off the top of my head anything else that's different. I would say with the Prince Irulan and Paul planning to marry her, it wasn't as snaky to Chani as it like comes across in the movie.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that they've gone that way actually, because there's that sort of creeping darkness of what has Paul become, you know, the visions and stuff. And this is like a red flag, you know, something bad's going to happen in Dune Part 3, i.e. Dune Messiah, which is the next book. And yeah, I was going to touch on like how sort of religion sort of spreads in it, but we've already gone on that. That was pretty good. And Paul's need to avoid a holy war as well. I've got some questions lined up for you.
Okay, yeah.
So, is there anything you didn't understand lore-wise, or anything you weren't sure on, or like what the hell was that about?
I think a lot of the things that for me was like the interactions with Paul which is straight up creepy, with his like fetus sister.
That's
like,
jokes. That's not in the book. That's not in the book.
I kind of understood like, because the mum's drunk the water of life, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
That it's now imbued the fetus with some powers, but it's just like really weird. Like, and you said it's not in the book, so does she have like powers later on in the books? And is she actually even involved in this stage of the books with where the films are?
God, how do I say this without spoiling stuff? Well, basically so this is one thing that wasn't conveyed very well. They did do it, but it wasn't done very well in Dune Part 2 is basically, so only women are allowed to have the water of life and only...
Yeah.
And it'll kill you, it's poison. But the Bene Gesserit have, using spice and stuff, they've managed to do things that allow them to control their body and be careful with spice. Not spice, with the water of life. But they should never have it when they're pregnant, so that's why it's such a big surprise. And also why this creepy ass stuff is going on with that unborn fetus.
I know.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how like some people like take that. I thought it was good. I like it. The creepiness of it, the way Jessica's just talking to her womb all the time, and then Paul has that vision of her sister, which is Anya Taylor-Joy, which is like really cool cameo. The only one thing I will say about Dune, but I'll talk about that later. I'll come back to it. One of my critiques. But yeah, it's creepy that Jessica is talking to the unborn baby, and the baby is actually really intelligent.
Yeah.
And all I can say is that, do you remember at the end when Paul confronts the Emperor and that the other Reverend Mother there, you know, the one that originally did the box test on Paul, like, put your hand in the box. Yeah. And he's like, sit down and shut up. Like, uses the voice nudge. And then she says, abomination. See, exactly. It was done in a very, wasn't given enough attention. But really, she's saying that she detects the baby within Jessica, and she's calling that an abomination. Now, difference with the book is Jessica's already given birth by the point. A lot of time passes between Paul mobilizing the Fremen in the south and the war against the Emperor and his Sardaukar with the worms. And Aaliyah is already born by that point and is incredibly wise beyond her age. Like, she's only like, I don't know, 6 years old, but she's just talking to Vladimir Harkonnen, and it's so creepy what she says. And she's actually the one that kills Vladimir Harkonnen as well. Yeah, I did
read that in my research,
Yeah. So creepy. She's a great character, Aaliyah. Can't tell you much more without spoiling, but you'll see. There's a reason why she's been, the Bene Gesserit is calling her an abomination. You'll see soon.
And is it mentioned at all, like within the books, that why do the Bene Gesserit always pick potential men to be the
because that's Haderach.
Yeah. And why don't they think that a woman could then take up that role?
I actually don't know, to be honest. I think it's possibly, maybe it could be something they know about biology and how spice affects men versus women. It could be that men are more unpredictable, whilst women seem to listen more in the Bene Gesserit.
But it also could be that potentially one thing that you do see with the Bene Gesserit is that they use sexuality to control men.
Yeah,
so
like
maybe
Vader Alpha,
So maybe it's that they think that if it's a man, we can control him, but if it's a woman, it's less likely for us to be able to control her. That could possibly be something.
It could be. I can't remember if they explain why they only think that Kwisatz Haderach can be a man. I'm really not sure, but it's amazing how just, you know, their power isn't in having an army or a navy or having nukes. It's just they've got plans within plans, the espionage they do, and the powers they have, the voice, that they can literally get you to do something using their Jedi mind tricks. Wonder where Star Wars got that from, huh? Yeah, so it's cool. Anything else lore-wise you weren't sure about?
I think another thing was, like, if they explained it more, maybe they explain it more, because I know we're probably going to mention it later, that they have announced like a HBO Dune TV series.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll go more into the lore there. But like,
I know what that's going to be about as well.
Kind of like understanding the factions, like where they come from, who are the different factions, and like you understand the importance of the Emperor, but then I've forgotten what's the council called again? The all the different houses.
The Landsrat?
The Landsrat still have a lot of power, and the Emperor is kind of more like a figurehead. And one thing we learn in the film is that he can't kind of like show favor to a specific house.
Yeah.
Or because if he does, then he would be then taken out, and then a new Emperor then would be selected. And then even maybe this, because I know they discussed like, the automatons, I think, is that what they're called? The nukes.
Yeah.
Not automatons. What do they call them again?
Atomics, I think.
The atomics, yeah. That they were. I think they might have discussed in the films, but I did read about it that it's based on the fact that they were used to tackle like before everything's happened now, AI technology when there was a great war against AI, and that's why everything that's machine is more organic, and people then have human computers that. So if because they said that Paul Atreides' family had kept theirs, so do other families have theirs as well potentially, and could they utilize them against Paul Atreides?
Yeah. So the whole thing about atomics is there's a big deterrent thing in it that if one house or the Emperor uses atomics against one other, everyone then has to use their atomics against whoever pushed the button first. So it's like a nuclear deterrence thing going on, which means no one actually ever uses the atomics in it. Again, this is something they didn't really explain or go into much detail in Dune Part 2. They're also there if aliens come.
Okay.
Which, it's weird, you don't see aliens in Dune. I mean, I've read the fourth book, still no aliens, but my brother, who's read many of the books, well, I won't spoil that then. But yeah, essentially that's the rule of atomics. But you see Paul lets off a nuclear weapon in Dune Part 2, and it's not really explained. Like, why doesn't everyone just use nukes? But really, that was a big, bold move. And the way he gets away with it in the books is that he says, I didn't actually use it on the Emperor and the Sardaukar. I just blow up the shield wall, which is a big, massive wall that stops the worms from getting to Arrakeen, like the capital city of Arrakis. So again, not really like well explained in Dune Part 2, but this is okay. So now I can start talking about I like the movie. The more and more time that's passed, I think I've enjoyed it. But I've got to admit, when I first watched it, I needed some processing time. Maybe I was tired and in bad mood, but my partner, who's not a big nerd, really loved it, whilst I was meh. Because I think for 3 hours, I spent the last hour just holding in a pee because I love Dune that much. And also that's where the juicy stuff was happening. Yeah. And so I was a little disappointed how there's things that they skipped out. Bearing in mind this is one book, they've split into 2 movies, both, I think, 3-hour movies. And I'm like, there's some details they've sort of missed out and stuff. But again, it's like, it's so difficult to put every detail from
into the film,
Yeah, TV shows, I guess, are better for that. Oh, and just to go back on what you said, the Dune spin-off is going to be called Dune, the Sisterhood, and it's going to be about the Bene Gesserit.
Okay.
So it'll be set before Dune, and it's about the Bene Gesserit. I can't say much more than that. I just don't know. But that'll be cool to find out.
And also, is there because I know with Rings of Power, there's major pushback from the Tolkien fandom. There was also pushback from Game of Thrones and fans over the last season of Game of Thrones. Is there any within the fans of Dune? Is there any form of pushback that they think that could Warner Brothers, especially with HBO as well, could they further dilute the story? Or is it that they've done well with the Dune Part 1 and Part 2, and there's a lot of optimism on what they're then going to do with the rest of the franchise and the other books that they plan to do?
You know what? I really don't know because I've seen some stuff. I'm on a lot of Dune shitposting groups on Facebook, and it's funny. It's called Dune Spice Posting. And then you get Marvel Shield posting. I love all these these puns on it. I've seen the hit and miss stuff. Some people saying it's fantastic. Some people saying it wasn't good. I know a couple of people in my friends group are really into Dune, and they say it was really good. Okay. I think overall it's I think it's been good, but I can't really speak for the entire Dune deep web fan base. But we'll see. As time goes on, there'll be more shit posting. So I'll see. Yeah, I should have asked my brother to come here. Actually, he's gonna be really upset. Oops. Any favorite moments in particular in the movie?
I would say the fight at the end. I think when Paul then wins and then makes his proposition as well to the princess as well. I think at the end, and I think the reason I liked it was like it was a culmination of everything that happened in the part 1 and also whatever took place in part 2, and then kind of like bringing it all to an end and to a head.
Yeah, I wonder if the cinemas are doing like a double screening, like Dune Part 1. I mean, that's 6 hours. That is mentally exhausting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a cool fight scene at the end. I wish they gave the actual battle with the Sardaukar and the worms a bit more time. It just did go by quite quickly.
And I think someone was saying the main issue now is that because we're now moving towards more like sci-fi and all virtual effects, that they then become really expensive.
Yeah, so they shorten it down.
They then shorten them down because, like, I think they said it was really. I think the thing that really helped, like, Endgame, was that you would only have like one major character fighting at one point in time, fighting Thanos. So either would be like. It was like Iron Man with Thor's hammer and his shield fighting Thanos, or it would be Captain Marvel fighting Thanos.
Yeah.
So then it wasn't like you seeing everybody fighting everybody all at once, which is kind of hard to capture. And people are saying like it was a major surprise that Dune, with all the special effects, with the major cast members and the amount of money you've had to then pay for the cast to be in the film, that it was $200 million to make the film.
200 million.
And then people are like that potentially it could have been more than that, and that it's a testament. But if the fight scene was longer, then it could maybe be 220, 250.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I feel like there's still a lot of money, but that sounds like less than some other movies and even TV shows. That wasn't Rings of Power. Like, wasn't that $700 million or something? Which, I mean, that's a TV show. I guess there's more runtime and more costs associated, but yeah, I guess they were trying to rein in the purse strings a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess that's one thing that's very cool about Dune is the costume design of it, the sort of artiness. Like you see how the Emperor dressed, how Princess Irulan dressed. Like the outfits are really out there, aren't they?
You know what also makes me funny so many times? Every time you mention Princess and Emperor, I always think Star Wars. And then I think to myself, that's probably where George Lucas got it from.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely. Honestly, Star Wars, Warhammer, they all stole it from Dune. Maybe Dune stole their ideas from someone else, but just said, there's so many things. The Voice, Jedi Mind Tricks, the Imperium, which is what it's called in this, Imperium and Warhammer.
Imperium in Star Wars, the Empire in Star Wars, the Princess.
The God Emperor, which you'll find about soon in Dune. That was from here originally. That's also in Warhammer. Yeah, man. Sci-fi is just a lot of borrowed ideas from each other. It really is, like so many. What did I think was a cool scene? I would say the Gladiator match between Fedor Alpha and the Atreides prisoners on the Harkonnen homeworld of Cygnus Prime. I didn't realize that was like, so they've got like some neutron star by the looks of it. Everything's black and white in that scene. They're next, because you see a look at their star and they have an announcement at the Colosseum like, on this wonderful day in front of our black star, we now bear witness to Fedor. And it looks like when a star meets its final years, it either supernovas and completely explodes, or it novas, leaks out a lot of gas, and then becomes like a white dwarf or a black dwarf. So I guess this is where the system that Cygnus Prime is in. That's really cool. Like, cool way to combine science fiction with art, because then everything's black and white. The color of that sun. Yeah,
and I think it is really cool because we know that every color that we see is from the sun.
Yeah.
And then the fact that if you then do have like a black sun or a white dwarf, you then would then have a shorter spectrum because it can only produce less amount of like electromagnetic waves. So like it can only produce like white light. Because imagine like that would be really weird. But I think another thing with like a white dwarf is that even though it's shrunk in size, it still holds the mass that it had before.
Oh right, okay.
So its
rays are still quite strong. Wow, in a very non-scientific way. You're still shipping sun cream.
Yeah, and I think that scene was actually really good. And I think I did read it somewhere that he had drugged them as well.
Yeah.
And then that's why he was doing so well against them.
And he's using poison blades, and that's what kind of made me a bit worried. You know, when the fight with Paul at the end, when he stabs him, like the blade stuck him, I was like, I hope I hope they've missed out that it's poison blades, because otherwise Paul's in trouble. But yeah, that's something else that's a little bit different in that scene. But really cool idea. Like makes it look even artier, like beautiful.
And like, I kind of see what you're saying. Like sometimes Hollywood puts in like what they'd say would be tropes. Like you had to see him as being really bad, really evil. And you also had to have like a love relationship with Paul and Chani as well. And you had to have a huge fight scene at the end. Mm-hmm. And it was like as if like it had to follow that aspect. And I think like based on what Josh said and also you've said is like, how are they going to take it further, especially when it's not as blatantly obvious like, oh, a person is trying to get revenge for the death of his father and his family. He meets up with a group, which funny enough sounds similar to Star Wars and also many other different fantasies. They meet up with a group who he trains with. He uses that group to then lead a rebellion against an evil kingdom or an evil empire, and then wins. And then I think because people are used to that, so then they're happy to then watch it. But then when it then starts to turn into as the later films where it's a lot of it is fights that you then start thinking to yourself, should this have happened? Is this the right path that they should be going along?
Yeah, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Then is it then going to have that large appeal, or will they have to then make tweaks so then it fits into like the Hollywood sci-fi fantasy template?
Exactly. And I think that's why Dune is good, because the storyline is a bit more original than others, because Star Wars is just the rebels, the rebellion, the resistance, the empire, the first order, and it's like same thing over and over again. Whilst Dune is about, it's weird because it becomes very, very much about political philosophy and religious philosophy and just morality as the books go on. And pretty much how absolute power corrupts absolutely. I can't say much more because I'm going to spoil the next 3 books. But there's something you don't see much in Star Wars, that's for sure. But then I guess that's why it's a bit more adult, because here's a question, like, do you think with this Dune Part 2, you've seen Part 1, do you think there'll be like a cult following for Dune as much as there is for Star Wars?
I think the issue that Dune has is that I would say it came too late.
Right.
I think the reason Star Wars did so well was that there was a void and then it was filled. Mm-hmm. The reason why the MCU did so well was that there was a void for like major superhero characters, and they filled that void and then got a cult following. Game of Thrones was very similar. The void of having fantasy, but actually have it on TV, and also having it X-rated fantasy on television.
That's true. It's very X-rated.
And then I think like, because now sci-fi has so much, you've got like Star Wars, you've got the future films, you've got the
Marvel
TV series.
As well, I guess it's sci-fi.
You've got like the Guardians of the Galaxy side of Marvel. You also had Loki, which was also, funny enough, talking about timelines and pathways.
The TVA.
And then you've kind of like got Star Trek, which has come back from a huge revival. They've got like 5 different shows. Yeah. Star Trek are now going to be doing more films as well. They're going to go back to their film storyline. I think they're bringing back Chris Pine as well to be playing Captain Kirk. Then you also have Warhammer, which will be coming out with our Lord and Savior Henry Cavill, who will be he'll be in that film set. So I think the issue is there's too many things to do with, and even like people are talking about like I think was it Babylon 5, I believe, that some people
it's an iconic show
are saying that they want that to come back. There are people also saying stuff like Stargate, which wasn't as big as the Star Trek, but fans
Stargate,
are wanting.
They can't remake that. That's
some
iconic.
fans want that to come back as well.
Oh no, Stargate was too good.
And then, especially with like Microsoft buying Activision, people are asking. Now that Microsoft have a Halo TV show, they also have a Fallout TV show. Will we get a StarCraft TV show?
I wouldn't mind that.
And then even I just mentioned now, like Halo is another sci-fi TV show set in space. So I think they have to do something that will then distinguish themselves from everybody else, because it's a really clouded environment. And I think Warhammer will, just because of like how iconic the Astartes look, and also how dark that world is. It will stand out from the rest of them, especially if they do start from like the Horus Heresy. Like that would be amazing, and that would then get a cult following. But I think for Dune, they would have to just continue with the books and focus on being more to the books and not try and fit into like a Hollywood template. So then you can then say, okay, then this is the philosophical, this is the political angle on what a sci-fi world could look like if you have, as you said, absolute power, and see how it corrupts somebody. Then to be like, oh, this guy is now a good guy, but he makes bad choices here, and trying to then fit into a template. So I believe it can, but it just needs to stick more to the books, because I think the books have a cult following. Yeah. And then if you stick to the books, it will then be able to then differentiate it from all other sci-fi dramas that are around.
I guess so. I won't follow that Hollywood formula. It's a good point, because that's what's happened with superhero movies. Market's too clouded, oversaturated, and people have got Marvel and superhero fatigue. And with all these adaptations that have come out, there's, as you say, so many science fiction ones. Like, think about it, we've got Dune, we've got Halo, we've got Foundation as well. That's another big book series. I think it's Amazon Prime have done that.
Okay.
The Expanse. Yeah. There's so many of them. It's like, even though they're different stories and they're not like, all Marvel movies that are interrelated, people just get fatigued, especially if it's generic storylines.
Yeah, and like even for like Marvel, fans have been like, why can't you go towards the comic books? Like, remember we mentioned with Thanos that Thanos as a character in the comics is a more fun watch, especially the fact that he's doing it for Lady Death and he wants to impress her, so therefore he wants to kill more people so he can then be with her. And the funny fact is that she's actually now fallen in love with Deadpool. And so Thanos in the comics cursed Deadpool with life, so Deadpool can never meet her. So that's kind of like made him even more harder to kill. And people like, that would be amazing if that was put into a film. But sometimes I feel like major studios are like, well, we don't want to try new things because we're afraid that if we then put 200 million into it and we only get, let's say, 400 million back, if we followed the formula, we might have got $1 billion back. And I think that's kind of like the issue. So I'm hoping that they can then create a cult following through the HBO TV series and maybe expand that out. So then you can then talk more about the philosophy, the politics about it, and that the films are then used to just show like key major points within the whole Dune franchise.
Yeah, I hope so. I think the religion element of Dune is what really makes it stand out to other science fiction. So I hope that's probably what draws it out from what will be a clouded market with all this stuff. I haven't seen the Halo TV show, have you?
No. The annoying thing is it's on Paramount Plus.
Yeah. It's like you got Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime, Netflix. Apple have their own one as well.
Yeah, Apple do, yes. Apple Plus as well. Then you've got, in the UK, I think you've got ITV Plus as well. You've got BBC iPlayer.
And then you got Mubi for like independent movies and
now
stuff.
Lionsgate have got their own one that you can now watch. And then you've got Star, which you can get individually, but then you can also buy it through Amazon. So I'm like, how many different shows are you gonna, different streaming services are you gonna then have to watch and subscribe to?
And I found it so funny because one by one they sent out emails saying we're going to crack down on password sharing. Yeah. Never happened because as soon as that happens, what will happen is everyone will just sign up for something else. Like it's like rattling the saber, like saying we'll do this, but they're just not going to actually do it.
And some people are thinking it could cause people to go back to pirating if they really did clamp down on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because like, are you going to have 6 different streaming services and then also pay for Virgin or Sky or
plus
BT
your TV license
and your TV license as well? And you're then thinking to yourself like, do I really need all of these streaming services? Because at least with Prime, you know that you get Prime delivery. So Amazon are like, you still need us.
Yeah, that's true. Prime is a bit of a package. It's like, what more can these things offer? I guess some of them have like gaming as well offered. Like I think you can play GTA San Andreas on Netflix now.
Yeah. Which
is kind of cool.
That's the clever thing they're trying to do is, because I know even you can do Fortnite on your Alexa. Amazon's Fire Stick. You can actually play it now as well. So maybe that's another way that they've seen is that maybe we can do some games here and there, and then that could convince people to sign up.
Maybe, but I guess they got to compete with like Steam, which is and like for example, a friend of mine's got a Steam. They've actually got their own portable, like a
Steam Deck,
Steam Deck. This is how I've been so far out of the gaming world, but. Yeah, and you can just play all the Steam games on now. I think there's some that maybe aren't compatible with the Steam Deck, but my friends seem to think there's quite a few, and that is cool. But then I guess, will Steam lose market once Amazon and Netflix pick up on actually getting some proper games on these platforms?
And talking about gaming, we've got films, we've got books, we've got a TV series. Do you think actually? Yeah, they do have Dune games. So
do they?
Yeah, they've got Dune. I was able to play it because they had a preview on Xbox because I've got Xbox Game Pass. It's called Dune Spice Wars. So it's basically you get to then play as like a faction, and you're basically able to then fight other factions for different parts of the galaxy.
Strategy game.
And they also did another game that they did an announcement 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, which was just talking about like a survival MMO set in the Dune universe.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, an Arrakis, maybe.
I believe so, yeah, because there was a lot of sand.
Yeah, true. I mean,
and funnily enough, another sci-fi franchise that has a planet with a lot of sand?
Yeah, exactly. Tatooine.
With worms in the ground that eat people.
The Great Sarlacc. I know, exactly. Honestly, the more and more you just read into Dune and watch it, the more and more you just realize, damn you, George Lucas. So let's talk about the critic score. Mm-hmm. Oh, actually, before we do that, just a random bit of trivia I want to point out. In terms of languages in the show, Game of Thrones language creator David Peterson was developing languages for the films as of April 2019, so before Dune Part 1 came out. So that's pretty cool. Link between Game of Thrones. So, for example, I think the language the Fremen speak is Chakobsa, or Chakobsa, I don't know how to pronounce it. So that was one he worked on. Cool random fact. We start off with Game of Thrones, talking about House of Dragon on this show. And just some interesting things about David. I've said David Villeneuve. It's Denis Villeneuve. God, so bad. He's French-Canadian. He's directed quite a lot of films, and I can start to see why he's seen as the arty director. So Blade Runner 2049 in 2017, he directed that. And fair enough, because his color palette, he really focuses on color in his movies.
He does, especially with Blade Runner. That was really good.
Oh, it was fantastic. The scene on the rooftop in the rain is so unforgettable. But then when they go to some destroyed city, the color palette in that as well. Yeah. Just see, it's a lot of similarities with Dune Part 2 and Dune Part 1. He also did Sicario in 2015 and Arrival in 2016, which is another good science fiction about aliens coming to Earth. That I can't remember. I only saw that movie once, but I do remember it being pretty good. I can't remember if it was very as arty as Blade Runner and Dune Part 1. I'm not sure. So, on to critics' consensus. So, what do you think the critics' score of Dune Part Part 2 was on Rotten Tomatoes.
85 roundabout?
Oh, rude. It's 93%.
93,
actually,
okay.
whilst Dune Part 1 was 83%, which is a bit harsh, I'd say, 83%. But yeah, 93%. I don't know. I wasn't super wowed about Dune Part 2 after seeing it. But after processing it more and more, I do really want to rewatch it. I think it was good. I think I just was tired and not in the best mood whilst watching it. And also I just had to hold in a pee for so long. I think it might be the only plus about watching it from home is just having access to the toilet easily.
Yeah, and being able to then pause and play. Exactly. It's more of like a relaxing environment, especially because you have your own snacks. You can pause and play at will. And I think another thing that I've really found out about like reviews from like critics is that it's less of like how close it is to the books or the storyline. It's the film itself. So that's why sometimes you can have like huge disparities between the audience and also the critics, because the audience who know the lore, who love the lore, have then gone to watch the film and they've enjoyed it. But a critic most of the time does not fully understand the lore behind it, but it's just watching it as a film in and of itself.
That's true. That explains why The Last Jedi from Star Wars had really good critics reviews, but the audience score was terrible.
Yeah, because they're watching it as a film, not as this is a sequel in a series of Star Wars films which have been able to then define many different generations.
Yeah.
And is one of the big pinnacles and staples within Hollywood. And I think they always have to watch it based on that specific film, not based on how it leads up to certain films. And that's why sometimes when you have a film where you basically, and a good example of this was the Spider-Man film, the second animated one, where they kind of lead up and leave it on a cliffhanger to go into the third animated film.
Right.
But some critics didn't like it because it's like, okay, now you've just left everything, you've built everything up and then you've paused it here. And now, because you haven't come to any form of conclusion, you've now left the audience to hang and wait for the next film. And I can't really use this film to then critique the next film, so then you're stuck.
But that's a real problem, I think, because, with the movie industry, especially, because putting stuff on a big screen, they try and water a lot of stuff down so it can get more of a audience, not just like the fans, because if it's just the fans, it's like that's not enough money for these $200 million at least plus budgets. So like the Thanos Lady Death thing, it's like maybe critics wouldn't like it if they put that in. Yeah.
And also this another thing that really gets on my nerves is like executives are always like, we need to make sure this can access as many people as possible because we want to make as much money as possible. And I think like some of the Marvel films have suffered from it because if you would take like the comic book version of events based on the events happen in a film, the comic book is more violent or more of a storyline. Like, for example, the hero dying or the hero betraying everybody in the end. But because that won't be popular with the general audience, it kind of then pushes back on it.
Ending.
Yeah, you need to. And I think that's the trope that Marvel got stuck into. And I think that's why fans loved, like, for example, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was like, it twisted all the tropes and actually the good guys ended up losing. And it was like, there was no hope. And until the end, where Luke then hops onto the Millennium Falcon, missing his arm, and then gets taken and is then rescued. But some fans thought that Luke was actually going to die holding on to that thing in Empire Strikes Back.
And I think this is a theme that's emerging as people like, not unhappy endings, but good twists and like dark things happening. Like Game of Thrones, Eddard Stark getting his head chopped off in season.
The Red Wedding, like so many people were upset with it, but if you ask them, did you enjoy it? They say yes, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful twist in the whole show.
And it's so memorable and iconic, and I wish that movies appealed to that a bit more. I think it's TV shows take more of that risk, I think.
They do,
which is good. Okay, what do you think the audience score, or speaking of audience scores, what do you think audience score of Dune Part 2 was?
If it was 93, I would say maybe 95.
Yeah, well done. Bang on.
Okay.
Bang on. And Dune Part 1 was 90% audience score. I could see it because I think, again, like going back to if you haven't read the books, I think just watching it objectively is beautiful to watch.
It is.
Like, it's so odd. Some scenes, like, the fight in the beginning between the Harkonnen troops and the Fremen.
Yeah.
That bit where they use their like anti-grav whatever things to just float up to the rocks. It's like you see 3 of them just going across that like sandy orange background. Beautiful, like so gorgeous. And I think even people who aren't into sci-fi would appreciate it. Like my partner, she's not really she's not a nerd at all. I'm such a big nerd, but I was really surprised that she said she really liked it. And she said she just loved how like arty it looked. And I guess that's why you got to see it on the big screen, yeah. What was another? Okay, time for me to get all out of me. Another issue I had with it is too many famous actors. Like,
yeah.
Well, it was good to have like Christopher Walken. Apparently, he came out of semi-retirement just for this. I don't know how true that is. Anya Taylor-Joy being a surprise cameo, as well as you've got like Zendaya. Also, Zendaya's always credited as just Zendaya. Like, she does have a surname in real life.
Yeah, she does, but I think she wants to go like by a moniker, which is actually very clever on her part for like marketing, because she's just been calling herself Zendaya from, I think, even like way back to like a Disney Channel days. So then
really? Okay.
If it's then just Zendaya, then it's something you then just remember, like Sting or Bono.
That's true, yeah.
And then
Sting was in the first Dune movie as well in 1984. So
yeah,
fun
so like
fact.
with a name like that, you then remember it, because it's like, okay, then it's like, remember like Gaza for Paul Gascoigne.
Yeah.
It's like a moniker that once said it can't be mistaken for anybody else.
Yeah, fair enough. Or like asshole for Boris Johnson. Lol. Probably gonna have to edit that one out.
Well, he's not the Prime Minister anymore, so
That's true. That's true. It won't suddenly disappear. Fair enough. Yeah, maybe that's why she got so. Because I just didn't know who she was. I didn't know her from like her pre-Dune days, and then just all over social media. She did Tom Holland and stuff.
Yeah, she did. She was in like the Spider-Man films. I think that was a major break.
Right, okay.
So then she was in those films, and then used that to then get into Dune.
We need to do a Spider-Man episode. I promise I will at some point. We did Doctor Who, so anything's possible.
Funny enough, if you count the animated film, there's over 10 Spider-Man films.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think we'll leave out the Tobey Maguire ones. They're definitely dated, but maybe the...
Andrew Garfield ones.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield and the Tom Holland
ones, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the first Tom Holland one. I thought that was pretty good, so maybe we need to watch Long Way From Home and the multiverse and all that stuff. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, things... Too many famous actors,
Yeah.
I think they're obviously doing that as a way of putting, because they know Dune's not got a cult following like Star Wars. Like, first Star Wars comes out, it was so incredibly popular despite expectations from even the cast.
Yeah.
Whilst Dune Part 1, it's like, it's not caught on to that pop culture nurse. It's weird because you see for Dune Part 2 on a lot of these shit posting pages, you see people dressing up to go watch it in cinema. And it's like, how are you going to like what? Someone's like converted a sandworm riding thing, which looks so weird. And then like someone goes dressed as a Reverend Mother with a box. And like, this is just, it's too adult. It's not like fun. It's too serious. But yeah, putting all these famous actors and actresses in, I think kind of is trying to get more people to see it really.
Yeah.
As cool as it is, it's like, for example, Christopher Walken, I can't really say whether he was good or bad as the Emperor because he just didn't really say much. Like, there wasn't much dialogue for him, and maybe that could be an issue of the script, but they just clearly like, okay, let's get someone famous, you know?
Yeah.
Anna Taylor-Joy as well. It's like, I think she's a good actress, but I'm not like crazy.
I think the benefit of getting her is she the person who was in, I might be getting this wrong, House of the Dragon at all?
No, she wasn't. She was not.
Because I think sometimes, like, if someone's signed to a studio or has a contract with a studio, they're then like, you know what? As a part of like your contract, we'll give you a bonus. Just do a cameo in this film.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they kind of do that kind of thing. Like, I know they've done it in like Disney films. So funny enough, you know that Will Smith played the genie in the remake of Aladdin.
Yeah.
But he also was in another film which was with Tom Holland, funny enough, about him being turned into a pigeon. Right. I remember watching it, but then like they were like, yeah, that's basically like, yeah, you can be the Aladdin, but we need you for this other film, which is a small budget. Okay. Yeah, so sometimes that's how they then sometimes get stars into films. But I do agree with you. I think that's kind of like what made Marvel really, really work, was that they picked Robert Downey Jr., a disgraced actor from the 90s, and brought him in. They brought Chris Evans, who was like a B-list actor who some fans who knew who he was, but wasn't that famous. They picked up Chris Hemsworth, who had been in Home and Away, brought him into... So they actually brought like the main actors weren't famous, but then those who surrounded them, like Scarlett Johansson or having a Samuel Jackson in it as well, were famous. So then you had famous names, but people who weren't famous. But I think because the characters were famous enough, they could get away with it. But I think the unfortunate fact is that because the characters aren't known enough with Dune, it's harder to then not put a famous name to it. Because there was I remember the film. There was a film called John Carter, and I think it's on Mars. I remember that. I think it's the oldest sci-fi, I think, turned into a film. I think it was written in the 1800s. The person wrote it, and Disney released it, put so much money into it. They didn't have any like major flop, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a major flop. And like people basically saying the major issue is that the time of year it came out and that they didn't have any major stars in it. Yeah, I can't really remember. They had the guy who plays McNulty in The Wire. Yeah, that was it. But he wasn't a main character; he was just a side villain. What's his name? Dominic West. He's great in The Crown and other stuff and The Wire. But yeah, you're right. It didn't really have many stars. So long ago, I remember it because there's a lot of hype around it. There was, big box office bomb. Yeah, and like people were saying, like unfortunately, they were saying the financial crisis could have played a key aspect in it, and also the fact that there were no major names. So maybe the studio had said, "We've seen what happened with John Carter. We need to have major names." So people will just go and watch it because they're a fan of like Batista or of Oscar Isaac or Josh Brolin as well. And then also of the main characters as Zendaya as well, or Timothy as well. Yeah, I mean, so if that contract thing is true, Timothy must be on a contract with everyone because he's been in Wonka. Yeah, he's been in so much stuff recently. If I hear one more thing about Timothy Chalamet, the funny thing is Wonka is also by Warner Brothers, so they probably basically said sign him to a contract. Oh, do X amount of films and just be the leading heartthrob. Yeah. Yeah, I know so many girls are like, oh, deliver me Timothy Chalamet. Shamalama ding dong. I know, it's nuts. Yeah, I guess it's a good way to get, because Dune's not immediately palatable to everyone, having all these big famous actors and actresses in it. Yeah. But I'm just impressed by how many they had, like, and especially Christopher Walken. I hadn't seen him in anything in ages, and he apparently came out of semi-retirement. We'll see if they all stay as the same actors and actresses as time goes on, because unfortunately that happens in some of these big budget series that they get replaced. Like, for example, Rachel in the Dark Knight series, Batman Begins, it was Katie Holmes. Then they got replaced by Maggie Gyllenhaal. I find it funny how they do it. And then like in Harry Potter, so Crabbe Goyle got replaced as well because of complications with the actor who actually went to my school. Oh. Yeah, and also he got in trouble for some criminal activities. So it says a lot about my school. Yeah, and I think another thing is, like, if a film is a success, you then have people then coming back saying, well, the deal that you signed me on for this film, well, I'm more famous now, so you need to pay me better. Yeah, exactly. Like what happened to Terrence Howard in the second Iron Man film. Because he was... Terrence Howard was, funny enough, the person who was paid the most for the first Iron Man film, because he was more of a major name, because Robert Downey Jr. had come back from like his disgraced time, and then they gave him an opportunity to be Iron Man. So when the second film came around and Robert Downey Jr. was making a lot more than Terrence Howard, he was like, you know what, I'm still actually a famous person. And also he'd done a film called Hustle and Flow that was nominated for an Oscar around the time. Right. So he's like, I'm also an Oscar nominated actor, so you're not going to give me that salary. So they were like, all right, fine. And then they then decided to use Don Cheadle, and then he's been War Machine ever since.
No, he's been around as well. He's quite recognizable thing. Oh, I see how that works. Okay, so one last thing on Dune. What do you think, Dune Part 3, what do you think would happen in it?
I think what will happen, as we did see, is that I keep forgetting what they're called, but the council?
The
Landsrad, they basically will reject Paul Atreides as being the emperor, and then Paul will then use the Fremen and also the resources of his house and also the emperor to then attack and defeat them and then bring them to heel. And then I think the major thing you'll also have is that they will also definitely bring in like the friction between himself and the princess as well. And then also his relationship with Chani and how the three of them and then have to interact with each other as well.
Just like Prince Charles, Camilla, and Diana.
And then also his sister as well, who probably will actually be born and actually be in it, which would also be kind of weird as well. Because you said like a 6-year-old talking with so much wisdom and acting like a full-on adult.
Already in a womb, she's already talking with so much wisdom. Damn. It's like that question when people are like, if you could go back in time with all the knowledge you had now, I was like, oh yeah, go back to when you're in the womb. That's the best time to start. Yeah. I can't say much. Don't want to spoil it for you, but you're not far off. I will say that. One thing that just came to my mind as well that we didn't mention is, you know, how the Fremen are very big on water conservation.
Yeah. Yeah. The water is from their like dead ancestors.
Yeah, and the way that I can't believe we totally forgot. See how they're like the big fight, the Harkonnens, they extract all the water from them and stuff. Yeah. That's how important water is to them. Like when someone dies in their culture or even a foreigner, they extract the water because it's not just wealth, it's also spiritual. It's like so important. When Jessica sees them doing that, she's gonna throw up. And I still was like, no, hold it in. Do not waste the water. And it's like,
yeah.
Yeah, that was quite amusing. God, could you imagine that? Just having to swallow your own puke. Oh, bloody hell. Any final thoughts on Dune Part 2 or the Dune series in general?
I would say like it's a breath of fresh air. The whole Dune series, like. Because a lot of the series that I do watch, at least, like if it's historically based, like Vikings or The Last Kingdom, I've actually learned the history before watching it. Or Game of Thrones, I'd read majority of the books before that started. Or even like with the Star Wars shows, I know some of the Star Wars lore, Marvel lore, DC lore. But actually to watch something and then read the lore afterwards is actually kind of like a breath of fresh air, because then you don't know what's going to happen. You're then able to then see the world through the films and then learn from it a bit more, like kind of similar to what's happening with Warhammer. Like I'm reading through like the Horus Heresy and just going through the book and I'm like, this world is like amazing. The same thing with Dune as well, and probably encouraging me to actually to go in to read the books as well.
Yeah. I hope it would. The books, definitely there's more detail, but you just see how much it becomes about political philosophy, the nature of how power corrupts and religion. It's so good. It's so unique. I would highly recommend reading the books to anyone, not just you, but the whole audience out there. Well, that's all, folks. We're going to wrap up there. Just want to give a shout out to the Pick Up the Mic Network, which we fall under. That is run by our Lord Jeffrey, who does so much behind the scenes. I'd love to say thank you very much, Jeffrey. You are the God Emperor of Dune in my eyes. Spoilers. If you guys really like our show, give us a like. Click the notification button so you can find out when we've got a new episode out. And if you really super like us, please subscribe to our Patreon. You know, we do a lot of our work on our own backs. I mean, we are going through a lot of programs that give us funding, but it would be great to be able to stand up on our own two legs. So anything you could give to us would be fantastic. And that's it. Good luck and good luck. Good night and good luck. I can't remember what the Fremen say. Probably say something very special, but for I'll say Zendaya. Goodbye.